name's John. I started PlayitLoveit at the end of 2018, so it was actually November 2018. So before that, I'd coached down in London with clubs such as Arsenal and Crystal Palace, like ladies. I've coached abroad in places like Aberdeen and Finland, and for the last 10 years I've pretty much done a lot of coaching work voluntarily right up until we started the company. So yeah, so after leaving London, we moved up to Aberdeen. So it's been quite a learning experience as well, because when I first moved up, I fell out of love with football, and I found it really hard to try and get motivated to get back into coaching. So before I actually started PlayitLoveit, I was finding it really hard to kind of get the motivation because of working all the time down in London and just really being busy, and it kind of took like a bit of a toll before I started the company. It's actually my wife and my business advisor that actually gave me that sort of, why don't you start it? And then I decided to take the plunge, and this is when PlayitLoveit was born. I came up with the idea about 5 years ago. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure when I was going to do it, where I was going to do it. Because I was living in London at the time, the idea was to always try and maybe come back to Scotland, but at first it was going to be Edinburgh, and then we decided actually we were going to move to Aberdeen. So it was kind of born a few years ago. I didn't take the plunge to actually start it though until, as I was saying, in 2018. So I started with 3 kids in a class, and basically 3 soccer talks kids. And it was tough going. You're having to try and get things going, and you're really trying to stay motivated because nobody really knew who I was. It was quite hard to try and get things moving, and we were doing a lot of, I was working at a school part-time as well, and it was right up until sort of May 2019, that's when it really started to kind of kick off, and that's when I decided to take the plunge properly and go full time. And then from there, in that sort of short space of time since May 2019, we have managed to coach over 700 players from all age groups, and we now employ 8 members of staff. So it's been quite a fast journey, but also there's been a lot of hours, long nights, early mornings going into it to really make sure that we can get to where we want to be. That one's probably the hardest to actually answer, not just saying this, but I'd probably say the biggest achievement was after COVID, keeping things ticking over, keeping the sort of players that we had involved, keeping them sort of motivated, and coming back sort of stronger, because when COVID actually happened, like all other businesses, it was such a massive deal, and we didn't know what was going to happen to us or anything like that. So to actually come out of the other end, actually kind of progressing and hitting the numbers that we hit in this term, that's probably the biggest achievement. So personally, it was probably the biggest challenge was when I moved down to London, and I didn't know anybody, and I was kind of down there on my own to study and learn and become a better coach. After the first year of doing an internship, there wasn't many opportunities going, and so I actually had to take jobs that I didn't necessarily want to do. At the time, I could have quite easily came back up to Edinburgh and went, right, okay, I've done this internship with such a big club and a club I supported, or I could stay down there and really try and make a go of it, which was obviously a lot of a harder decision to make. But I'm really glad that I've done that, because I stayed down there, worked really hard, got in a couple of jobs that were then coaching jobs that led me to then become a better coach overall. But at that time, I think that was definitely one of my biggest challenges, because London was such a big city, it was either sink or swim. So that was probably, on a personal level, the biggest one, because there was a lot of soul searching. In terms of the company, the biggest challenge was definitely the impact of COVID. Obviously, like any other business, it's probably the same, but having to constantly think, to have constantly rethink about different classes that you might want to do, or different sort of venues that you have to use because you can't use the venues that you're normally using. Is extremely hard. And the way that we operated as a business before was we were very much about what we wanted to really try and do is bring everybody involved and make it more of a family feel. But through COVID, we couldn't really do that because the parents, for instance, or whoever taking the children or the players in, couldn't actually stay in the building because of restrictions and stuff. So that really made our sort of job harder, because then we're trying to figure out how can we keep things moving and keep things progressing when some of these things have been taken away. And I generally think, I don't think many other companies would be able to handle what we've been able to handle in terms of a football setting, because I think we've dealt with it as well as what we could have. And you always look back at it now thinking, oh, you might have done something differently, but I think with what we've had, I don't think you could really write off what we've done. So short term would be maintaining the quality that we've got. I think that's probably the hardest thing any company has, is it's basically making sure the quality still is good the bigger it gets. And that's something that we need to make sure that we do as a company. So that would be the number one priority. Obviously, still going into different areas throughout Aberdeen and Shire. So there's places that we've looked at that we'd love to start then going, especially after the success of Inverurie and Westhill so far. Long term, we'd love to have our own venue. We'd love to have the opportunity to coach sort of more players, and for myself to coach more experienced players, like players that are playing sort of semi-pro to professional sort of level. So there is a lot of sort of dreams in the pipeline for what we want to achieve and what we want to do as a company. So in 5 years, I would see myself my wife will love it, sitting in an office, because I'd love to be able to have an office that we would use. I think PlayitLoveit would hopefully still be the same quality it would be as of today, but not just in Aberdeen, possibly in places like Dundee and Edinburgh, for example. That would be an ultimate goal, is to try and franchise it out, but again, that would just have to depend on if it's the right fit for us as a company.